Peace and blessings. Welcome back to the Digital Media Academy. So this is part 2 of session 2. In the first part, we went really deep into branding and tried to think a lot about why it's so important that you get your brand right. And so next, we're going to go really deep into content strategy, some publishing strategy, an overview of different types of ways you might publish content and some strategies with that, some 101s on things like video production, on photography, on web design, on publishing. And yeah, I hope that this is helpful. We're going to get into it now. So the first part really is about knowing your strengths. This is something that's taken me a long time to understand, that you can't do all of this work by yourselves. This is so huge. Everything we're talking about here involves so many different moving parts. And there's a slide at the end of this presentation where it really shows that this thing is, you could think it's like a puzzle. You could think it's like a giant spider web with all these interconnected parts that you have to get right. And so it's really important that if you don't know your strengths, you figure them out quickly. And if you're building a team, that you build a team around with people that will complement what your weaknesses are. Because as we talked about in the first class, this statement from Pixar, right, that quality is the best business plan. What that really is about is that your brand, the content that you're producing is what the world sees of you, right? It's what the world believes about you. And if that content in this market where everyone's producing really high quality content, where YouTubers are putting out high quality content by themselves regularly, right? This is what youth are consuming. This is what our generation is consuming. I'm not calling myself a young person or a youth by any way, but our generation. This is what we're used to consuming. So it's just really important that you understand the high bar that you have to have your brand at. And I think that especially within a lot of faith-based organizations, a lot of Muslim organizations, we might not always hit those bars, right? We might have really great content, but if we don't spend time on the brand aspects, people might not take us seriously. So one of the most important points for publishing today, and I touched on this previously, is this quality content creation for long-term versus throwaway media. This is what we're going to talk about here, is really about how do you create content that will live long-term rather than content that's just quick and that people will consume once and that people will never find again. It's really important that when doing this work over the next few classes, we're going to go over these 4 different types of media, right? Number 1, and I really like these names. Number 1 is owned media, meaning your own media assets, what you own, your photography, your videography, your website, right? This next is what's called within the industry rented media. It's important that we understand social media not as something that we own. It's not our own content. We may be putting our own content onto social media, but with algorithms constantly shifting and changing and fluctuation in usage of social media networks, that's very much a rented space. Like back in the day, meaning like 4 or 5 years ago, people were spending tens of thousands of dollars to get these huge Facebook followings to publish all of their content on Facebook. And then Facebook went and flipped its entire algorithm after 2016 to be focused almost exclusively on your so-called friends, on the people you're connected to directly, rather than the pages or brands that are on Facebook. And so with that became a huge crisis for some publishers, and a lot of publishers that relied upon Facebook actually basically became pretty irrelevant, or in many cases, they went out of business completely. The third piece being earned media or public relations, and then finally advertising and paid marketing. So this class, we're going to talk exclusively about owned media, the assets that you own yourself. And I said here, owned as much as we actually own anything on the internet today, because a company that you're using for your website could go out of business, or it could change its templates, or any number of things could happen, right? And even maybe it's more rented than owned, but we do own the media assets that we create as organizations. It's just how we distribute them is the biggest question mark, and how we distribute them consistently. So again, to reiterate, the biggest part of that for me, the first part is building brand or design led organizations with art direction and understanding of our audiences as key components. I talked a lot about this idea of audience development. That's mostly terminology that's used in the film world. In technology, they use this term customer development or customer mapping. I linked to a really good customer journey map template that you see here, where you really can think through how you build brand awareness with different layers within that customer journey, what customer goals may be, customer actions, what are the key touch points and channels where you're finding them, what do your customers think about your brand, what really are the pain points of the customer or the people that you're building your organization for, what are their pain points, and how is your content answering some of those pain points for them, right? And then what are your opportunities to improve? I think that these, read this article about customer journey map again, because why am I really hammering this point, right? Is that if we don't understand that customer journey, if we don't understand our audiences, our egos can really get in the way. And that's what I was talking about within my whole journey within building my own companies and my own brands, right? Is that my ego was getting in the way. I believed that I knew or I understood what the world may want, but without the science of publishing and that real data feedback, I was unable to understand the big picture. That's why it's important, again, that you start at that MVP level, the minimal viable product level, so that you can test. Blogging, writing, content marketing is a really cheap way to do that, to test your ideas, because we don't want to waste months and years testing an idea, not getting the feedback that we want, not getting the brand growth that we want. At some point, you may have to pivot, and it's better that you, as the terminology goes, fail fast, right? And go back, start over, rather than failing really slowly and wasting a lot of time on something that may be working. So the one of the key parts I didn't talk about there is working with designers, right? As with all things, you really do get what you pay for. You can pay anywhere up to $10,000 for a brand kit with really great designers, really great brand studios, and they'll walk a process with you. They'll do, ideally human-centered design, where they're asking you questions. They're helping you think through what problem your brand is trying to solve, what problem your company is trying to solve, and how you relate to those people. Or, if you don't have a lot of money, which most of us don't when we're starting out, you can look for more global designers, maybe not US, Australia, European-based designers that can build you a good brand kit for around $300. The difficulty there is finding them. It's not even that difficult to find them. It's the difficult part is vetting them. Make sure that you're going to get what you want. Make sure that you look into their portfolios, ask questions about how they work with clients. What is their process for working with clients? If they don't do something like I said previously, even set up a mood board for you or talk about that, then they might not be taking you seriously. They may be taking a really low, income, cheap job for them, that you're not going to get what you want. But again, as I said before, it's super important that you understand what you want when you're going into the process, at least to some extent, because even if you're working with an expensive designer, that art direction, that organizational direction is so key, that as creative as you are, as creative as the creatives are, they may not be able to work with you or give you what you want if you yourself don't know exactly what you want. And if you really don't have any ideas, look at this idea of human-centered design. I linked to a couple of different websites, like Stanford's D School has some really incredible resources there for what a human-centered design or design thinking modules and courses would look like. You could think through some of those things yourself, even before you go to a brand studio. That may help you ideate, right? And get some good ideas flowing. So next, right, moving past branding and into websites for publishing, this is not that big of a list because I don't think that you need to go that deep into what it is that you're looking for. Um, Medium baseline, super easy platform to publish on. A lot of big publishers actually use it because of how easy it is to publish, how you can build an entire magazine on that website. You can make it look really beautiful. There's some functionality in it, but there's not a deep level of customization. And if you really want to raise money on a website, that may not be the best look. It might be good for brand building, it might be good to test ideas, but it's not good long term institutionally. I use a lot of Squarespace sites because they're super easy, drag and drop. If you can use Facebook, you can use Squarespace. But for long term, with the business subscriptions, which range between like $35 and $60 per month, you can actually end up spending more money on that than you might spend building a WordPress site that has a lot more customization. There's no monthly fees. You just buy a template and then you have to work with developers to build that site. So if you know someone, WordPress developer that you might have a relationship with, that generally speaking is going to be the best thing for long-term building organizations, websites, and for building a publishing site. WordPress can be a bit wonky and difficult to work with though. And so I don't love to work with WordPress. And other no code options, of course, are Wix. I don't personally use Wix at all. There's tons of templates, but I don't use it because it's an Israeli company and they go against BDS. So I wouldn't use Wix on anything that I build. Webflow is the newest platform of the group, but a little bit more complicated than Squarespace. But again, it has more customizations. It's a huge venture-backed company at this point. Looks like they'll be growing into the future. You can check that out as well. If you want to build a course like I'm building here, what's nice about courses, especially if you're like a brand studio and you have an idea for a course, maybe on videography or filmmaking, right, is that you can actually build a brand studio site with those course builders. Like Thinkific is the one that I'm using. The website is okay to work with, not nearly as easy as Squarespace, not nearly as functional, not nearly as many ways to customize the site, and it takes some time to use. I've also looked a lot at Kajabi. Kajabi definitely is more on the marketing side as well. It has all these marketing funnels built into it. So that's if you really want to go heavy into marketing and automation of your marketing, you could look at Kajabi. The other one that's even more on the marketing side is Kartra, which a lot of people who sell that all their whole business is they just sell courses. A lot of them use Kartra. Their templates are very basic, but their strength is in that funnel building, is in the marketing automation. So, and then Teachable and Skillshare. Skillshare, you can actually make some decent money on if you put a course on Skillshare and a certain number of people who are their premium customers are taking your course. There's a good way you can make passive income there as well. So that's baselines for websites for publishing. I'll be really honest, is I hate building websites. It's probably my least favorite thing about digital publishing. And that's maybe part of the reason why I got out of the full-time publishing game, but I just consistently had difficulties working with developers and what templates may look like on WordPress, for example, is generally not what they're going to look like when the site is finished. To work with web developers, you even more than designers, because it's so much more expensive, you really need to make sure that you get recommendations from other people, that you look at their work, because you can end up spending like $2,500 to $5,000 to build a really high quality website. And that's a big investment for any organization. So make sure that you know what you're getting, make sure that they have a clear timeline with you, because if you don't, you might not, it may end up taking forever, right? So I know that one of my strengths is not building websites to the point where I really, like I said, out of everything, it's what I hate the most in this industry. what you need to think about with digital publishing, there's a number of things here that are super important, right? Again, is this idea that you're a design-led brand, that your branding, your assets, brand assets, the way you tell the story about your organization visually has to be at the center of everything. If you're really going to go heavy into digital publishing, the website design has to be high quality again, which is, like I said, based on where you're at. You want to consider that. The other option, of course, would be you have no website, and a lot of people just build things on social media. Now they build brands on social media. We're going to talk about that more in the social media component, which is in the next course. Your article pages and design need to, again, it can't just be your header image that's beautiful, but you also have to think about how your articles are laid out, what the header images look like, what the images look like within the article, how you can take out pull quotes and different font sizes within the article. And it's really important that we consider that a lot of people today, when they are reading on the internet, they really skim. So a good example is a now defunct website called Mike.com, where they really designed their, or another one would be Upworthy, where they really designed their articles in a way where they're super skimmable. Like you would almost have, rather than paragraphs, you'd have big text boxes throughout the articles with photos and GIFs and these things that are make the article consumable quickly. Again, I think that a lot of that stuff is clickbait. A lot of that stuff was growth oriented, and is part of the reason why a lot of digital media companies failed today, is because they were so focused on growth, so focused on big numbers, that they took a lot of venture capital debt. And and a website like Upworthy now that was destroyed by Facebook changing its algorithms, you don't hardly hear anything about Upworthy today, because you don't see the same virality for articles on Facebook that you once saw. Now everything is statuses, live shows, mainstream news articles, etc. You see much less clickbait, and part of that had to do with the impact that clickbait was also having on elections and fake content. So that stuff is super deep, and it's a whole other course, right? For your long-term growth, you really need to think about your SEO from the beginning. How do you do SEO well? How do you, and this is part of the reason why even the brand of your organization, especially like some faith-based or Islamic brands might use, like even the term that we were using, wide, like how are people going to find that on the internet via SEO? They're not, right? That's why Center for Global Muslim Life being the SEO target there, or Muslim Life being an SEO target, whereas the other one, it just didn't have any possibility. But then you have to think about SEO not only in your lead article, your lead branding, your lead copy, but then also within the articles themselves. Key here, as I'll talk about in one of the next slides, is your copy and your headlines, right? It's important, again, that you spend as much time thinking about the language of your site as you do thinking about the design. What are your content verticals, right? If you understand what your organization is, what are the content verticals or content buckets that you would create for your organization around different categories of content that you're focused on, right? If you're focused on, like, again, something like global Christian life, global Muslim life, you're not going to break that into, you're not going to cover all of that life, right? You're going to cover specific aspects of it, which are called content verticals. So for instance, like we have been doing a lot of stuff about global Muslim film, about arts and film. We've done a lot of stuff about startups. So those would be content verticals, entrepreneurship. Our faith-oriented content is more focused on spirituality. So again, those are content verticals within our organization, right? They're not, or like if you're a social justice organization, what aspects of social justice do you want to focus on? And maybe you're publishing some research different things that you're doing to create attention, or maybe that you're even doing some PR around, what would those larger content verticals be? Again, your header images, there's really a math here. That's your headline plus your header image is what people click on. They don't know what's in the article. So you really, if you could have a really great article, a really beautiful article, something that people should be reading, but if there's not a good header image, if there's not a good article title or headline, then people aren't generally going to click on it. So thinking about that in depth is super important. I use unsplash.com for like everything. There you can get, it's open source, beautiful, full size imagery. That's another thing you have to understand, even within using Google Images, is what's open source, what's not. I mean, you can use things like, I do a lot of like screenshots for different things on the internet as well, but it's important that you understand image sizing, how you have the correct size of an image so that it's not pixelated on your website or within your presentation. And then you should generally make citations with your content that you're using, photos that you're using, etc., on your site as well. And then, of course, within those digital media pages, it's super important that you have your social media linking. Again, I linked to this really great article about Upworthy to kind of go more, where you can go more in depth about their process, where they would have their authors write 25 headlines per article, because that they know how important that headline is to getting people to read the content. And then they'll do a lot of email marketing, and they would actually do A/B tests with, say they get the top 2 headlines, they'll A/B test the 2 headlines in their email marketing, and then choose the winner between that A/B test as the actual headline for the article before they push it out on social, right? And that's this understanding that a lot of names of your content may be bad, a lot of first headlines may be bad. That's why it's important that you really brainstorm and keep thinking about what is a good headline here, because it's that important as to why people click on your content. So that's publishing. I mean, I could go really in depth into publishing. I don't, but a lot of you may not be doing that at a high level. Of course, I think that's what takes the most time. I'm very passionate about publishing, but like, again, that's something I love. I know it's a strength of mine, but not everyone is doing it full time. But even if all you're doing is like blogging, right, it's still super important that, again, you understand this math of your article headline and your header photo, and then the copy within the article, making sure that the articles are written in a really strong way, that they're edited correctly, that the grammar is correct. Like, all of these things are important to your brand and to get people to read your content consistently. Now, say that your organization has no photography, has nothing to photograph in these times we're living in, where a lot of us are in quarantine still, or mostly still living inside, and we're not having public events the way that we once did. Then you're going to have to use those brand assets from Unsplash, or whatever you may have about your organization, right? Old photos, ask people who were taking photos at the events for those photos. Whatever you can do, make an archive for your organization. I think that's super important as well, is where are you archiving your content? How do people find your content, right? Or how do you find your own content organizationally, making sure that your hard drives are well organized, right? These are all things that you should be thinking about for the long-term life of your organization, that maybe you're no longer there, or you as a digital media producer are no longer with the organization. How can they find the content that you're working on and producing long-term? But with photography, if you're shooting something, photography is something that's often really overlooked. It's fairly inexpensive. You can hire a good photographer for a day shoot for $100 to $200. And, again, it's important that you vet them. You look at their portfolios. They should, at the very least, that person should have a website. If they don't have a website, they should have a strong social media presence where you can check out their work, right? And then hire that person. And because this is the key to building a visualized brand. And again, as you're looking for assets, check out Unsplash for imagery that's related to your brand. When you're looking, the difficulty there is that we need more diverse databases of photography. And so Unsplash is okay on the diversity level. Everyone could do better. And there are some specific websites that focus more on diverse communities. I'll link that in the overview of this week. For video production is definitely more complicated than something like photography or writing, because you need, generally speaking, a team of video producers, or you need a studio that has that team, right? Filmmaking is the ultimate, is what we all call, who are filmmakers, is the ultimate team sport. If you don't get each of these parts right, you're going to fail at what it is you're trying to do, right? So that has to do with who's producing the content, right, within your organization, who's owning that content, who's directing that content. If you're hiring out someone, who's the videographer? Again, making sure that you really vet that person and look at their work. Your sound recording is as important to this work as the imagery itself, because if you capture the imagery but your sound is junk, you're going to have to reshoot the whole thing. So again, making sure, if someone comes to you and they want to do a video project for you and they have no sound equipment, or they don't recommend to you that you bring a sound recordist to the shoot, then they may not know what they're doing. It's a pretty big red flag, right? Because that's how important sound is. Your editor, making sure, again, each of these people you have to vet, and you have to know that they're good at what they say that they're good at. The editor is the one that ultimately is creating the final style for the video. So it's important that you look for other videos that they've done. You tell them that you want a style similar to that, or that you find content as examples of what you want to produce and give it to them. Again, mood boards for style within videography, super helpful and highly recommended. Your script obviously is super key, because you generally are probably going to write components of the script, especially if it's low budget, nonprofit based filmmaking or video work. I think that the issue of writing scripts is one of the biggest barriers for a lot of people. And that's why I included a script sample in this week's content with a film that I made, so you can actually go over and see how a script looks like for an editor, and where I'm telling him to take content from. You're giving them the timing of different parts of the shoot that you did. You may have to go that in depth with them, or they may be able to do that themselves. But the script isn't a barrier that you cannot overcome. Again, writing is about learning different styles of writing. And if you know how to write at all, you can learn different styles of writing. Writing a script for video is just a different style of writing. Obviously, the types of cameras are super important. If you're out working with a videographer, they're going to ask you what quality you want things at. Generally speaking, you should at least be doing 1080p, which most camera phones can shoot at today. If you want something super high quality for the web or for YouTube, and Facebook generally will only publish it like 1080p. I think similar with Instagram, but on YouTube, obviously you're moving more into, you can publish in 4K. And so that's something that you have to think about, which is what is the output that you want from the cameras. And then you have to make sure that you're using cameras that will, say you have a shoot that has more than one camera. Are you using cameras that are of the same quality so that you can ultimately produce one piece? Do you want on-screen graphics, where if you need B-roll components, which the script that the example I gave was a heavy B-roll piece, then obviously you need to find that B-roll yourself, or you need to have someone who's doing that research for you. And then costs, again, here, you can get a video done for you really low end, like $500. You can get more likely 1,000 to get in all those elements. But even then, that's really about as low budget as you're going to get. If you're just doing like a talking head video, that's probably what you should pay, right? But again, you're paying the editor for that? Do you want graphics involved? Are there design elements involved? You have to think of each part of this. And then the way you do math with videographers, sound recordists, editors, they generally have day rates. So you have to figure out their day rates, and then you figure out the number of days of the shoot. And then maybe the editor will charge you based on how many days it will take them or hours it will take them to actually edit your piece. So realistically, you could go into the $5,000 to $10,000 range. That's why some larger organizations will hire this stuff in house if you can find good people, right? So, like Omar Suleiman, like his organizations, obviously, right? They focus a lot on SEO. They have all these SEO people in house. They have a video team in house. But again, that's multi-million-dollar budgets. So if you're an organization that has a multi-million-dollar budget, then you're gonna have you want to hire pretty high quality people. It also depends. These costs also vary by where you're at in the world, where you're at. Like even in the United States, different parts of the United States, obviously California, New York, maybe Seattle are going to be some of the most expensive. Parts of the Midwest, Florida, the South, you can find cheaper video producers to work with. So here's that script template that I included with the video. Again, I think that this is a good example where I'm going to make this full screen, where you really should be able to break this down pretty easily and understand how this works just by looking at this script and looking at how we broke it down, right? So you have your sequence or your outline of, you have your big like 5 or 6 points that you want to hit within your film. And that could go, if you have a bunch of cuts or a bunch of edits, it could go into like the 20 or 25 different sequences. Then you have your dialogue broken down for that section, what you're doing in that section. Then you have what images you want and where you want them. And that if you shot a lot for the video, you're going to have to work with the editor to find what the best pieces are, or they're making the whole piece. But you might have a really strong idea as to what that is. But again, it's not complicated to write a script. So this is an example of that, but you have to understand that there, of course, it's different than writing like an article. Things are going to be, you have to speak so much more concisely. Your words have to be very clear. You have to think about the length of your video, and the length of your video can also have a lot to do with what the cost of the video is as well. And then the next piece on the deck, right, as some more examples of what you might produce if you're making a video and you're just starting out a brand, is this idea of brand manifestos. So I'm going to show you a couple examples of what a manifesto video will be, and why you should produce one. This is a really great way to connect with your audience. It's a great way to show the true vision for what you're doing organizationally. So I'll show one first of my own, and then I'll show a recent one from another organization that I like a lot. So this is our video, Diaspora of Hearts, that we use for the launch of the Center for Global Muslim Life.
We've come from so many places on this earth, but our lives share a common destiny as we walk together. In a time of crisis or in a time of peace, this is a story of 8 billion beating hearts. We share this one fragile planet, the air we breathe, the land we walk on, and the oceans we swim in. Imagine borders that surround us, some more fortified than others. Borders for many of us define our lives today. For global capital and those with the right passports, borders are easy. For the global masses, these borders tell us where we can and cannot go. For the world's 2 billion Muslims, 1 out of every 4 people on this earth, our lives are interconnected by the diaspora of our hearts, of our families, and a spiritual lineage that stretches back 14 centuries. But we are only told stories that put us in boxes to police our identities. What if the full story was told about our faith, about our lives, about our cultures, the story of our love for humanity, and our stories as protectors of the world? This is for the future builders, the dreamers, those who want to escape from the futility of generations past destroying our shared world. Media has been built to divide us. We ask, what if it was built to connect? This is a manifesto written across screens. We need you. Beyond languages, beyond cultures, beyond faiths, beyond all barriers and borders, we need each other. This is for all of us.
Yeah, so that's the launch video that we published when we launched the Center for Global Muslim Life this past April. But it's actually a video that I produced. I first started gathering those brand elements when I was living in Malaysia, and I worked with the Malaysian film team, like a really dope studio there. That it's interesting that content looks like it's all over the world, and a lot of it is just shot in Malaysia. And I mean, that's how diverse Malaysia is, right? That you can get that many diverse scenes within Malaysia, but it also shows that it's this beauty that we're going for, obviously like a high brand quality. And then the language that we're using there is a manifesto for what we're trying to build. And then I worked with Justin Mashouf, who's a really great independent filmmaker and he works full-time in Hollywood as an editor and as a producer. And so he brought in some other global elements. And so that's an example of using your relationships to find a person that can bring in a whole nother layer to your work that may have been missing. So yeah, that's that video. I think that, again, this idea of brand manifesto videos is that you can really get a lot done with that, and you can use it for everything, right? You can use it for social media campaigns. You can use it for, live digital events that you might be having now, or banquets that you may have in the future. Having a really high quality brand manifesto video is something that you'll be able to keep for at least a few years, and things are changing so much that you have to keep producing content. But here I'm going to show you another one from How Hijab that they just published this week, and I really, really love this video.
Hey you, there's nothing you can't do, right?
I'm busy.
Of course you are. Can't change the game? Got 'em. Can't do more than you did yesterday? You can't be stronger? You can't be tougher? You can't do stretchy backward stuff? You can't miss? Sorry. You can't beat your personal best? You can't do the coolest thing in this video? You come back even stronger. They tried to ban you? You don't sweat it, right?
I'm cool.
All right, ladies, go out there and get it, because we never settle for anything. So tell me I can't. I dare you.
Yeah, so that's a really beautiful video that they just launched. How Hijab is a venture-backed hijab company based in New York, and they've been producing really incredible content for a long time. One of the reasons why they're so successful is that their founders are a husband and wife duo, Melanie and Ahmed. And Melanie is the face of the company. She kind of grew into this influencer marketing hijab powerhouse, but her husband is an expert digital media marketer, and he was working at all these huge corporations, and then they decided to leave those jobs and start their own company. And a lot of their growth is because of that team that they put together there, right? But then in this Manifesto video, this is actually for their launch of their athletic apparel part of their brand, which now I think they're like 4 or 5 years in, right? So they're just launching that, but of course it's something that Nike and other big brands have been launching as well, and so they want to compete in that space. And they also used an influencer for the campaign, which is Bilqis Abdulkadir, who's a professional basketball player who basically can't play professional basketball because FIBA, the body, the organizing body of global basketball, won't allow women to wear hijab. So they used her in the video, and then now they're doing this whole influencer marketing campaign with her to take it to the next level. So I think those are really two great examples. I mean, any organization, yourself as a producer, like a lot of back in the day, filmmakers would just put out reels. Now things are like much more branded and storytelling oriented for filmmakers to tell the story, even for their brand studio or whatever it may be, to tell about the work that they're doing. So anyway, just it's a good idea to have a brand manifesto video. And yeah, we'll go back to the slideshow. So yeah, that's how hijab and brand manifesto. Okay, so say you did all of those components. As complicated as that is, the actual hardest part is the distribution, is now getting your content in front of eyeballs, right? So if you get through all those steps, then you come to the most complicated part. It's really good to work with people who have large reaches or are influencers to help launch you. If you have any of those people related to your company, that's how you definitely can grow your brand, having those people. That's why people invite influencers to their live sessions and to their banquets and to different things, right? As you bring in that big speaker, the same logic exists for marketing. Or if you're doing really high quality content like we did with the border mosques, the border mosque film, you can actually create partnerships. Like that film was a partnership that we did with CARE and Empower Change and MoveOn.org. And so MoveOn has multi-million person Facebook list and these huge email lists. So that really helped us get that film distributed in ways that we wouldn't have otherwise. If you do really, really high quality film content, obviously you can also definitely submit it to film festivals. Try to get it to as many people as possible, because if you do high quality, diverse content today, people are looking for that. So next, the last few things, right, for this component is creating content buckets and created branded content series. So again, like, what language for your content? How do you think about these things where you have a certain topic idea? How do you research it with what your SEO rankings might be? How competitive certain words are? How do you think about building brand awareness with each piece of your content? How do you think about raising money or creating sales with that content? So really, again, it's this idea of keywords, customer topic discovery. If you don't have a bucket area or you don't understand where you're putting that content, then it's not going to reach its goal. It's not going to be distributed correctly, right? So all of that needs to be thought of as you're beginning to go into marketing. And of course, in the next course, we're going to go much deeper into the marketing components, and we'll go more in depth into that. Because so if you get all of this right, this is the really big picture now of creating content verticals and everything that you need to be thinking about of where you can put it. A lot of your writing, a lot of your blogging, it can be reused for emails. It can be reused for social media posts. But creating editorial calendars that understand what each part of these things are is really important. That this is a blog post. This is copy for social. This is going to be going in our email. What is our SEO rankings compared to organizations that are doing similar work to ours? How do we use this to do list building? How do we how do we think of a similar topic? Does it make more sense to have this be a live stream versus a podcast? Again, that's where we'll go next week, and we'll begin talking about what I'm even using for this course and recording these sessions, which is StreamYard, which I use for all of our live sessions that we do with the different platforms I'm building. Really, how do you find your niche within your topic? That's what this is about, right? So it's becoming very clear on what your core content verticals are and what are all the ways that you're going to get that to reach people. And obviously that brings us into where we'll go next week, which is really more focused on social media content, on PR strategies, and like doing research and how do you get, like, people may want to know about your content. People may want to write about your content. I think we've lived in such a crazy news environment with this virus and everything that's happening, that the virus has been at the center of everything, and PR has been super difficult. Or getting even eyeballs for our content is more harder than it's ever been. But we'll talk about strategies next week, God willing. And so I hope that this helps you think through the baselines of publishing and the really big picture you need to be thinking about as you begin to take the next steps in your journey as a digital media marketer, publisher, strategist, whatever you want to think of yourself as. Peace and blessings.